Yes, sir.
I was just looking at Mr. Coleman's accrued benefits. Well, he only has 8 hours of sick leave. He has 300 hours of vacation and still has 16 hours of wellness leave.
Wow. I'm not trying to be too tough on him. It's just that,
I just thought that I could be mentioned that he was running out of some of this.
yes, sir. Oh, goodness. Let me fix that right now.
And so we need to bring that to the community with resources. And then on the path of extension and.
Well, welcome again.
They can't hear us, yeah.
And so while we wait, is it Dr. Worley? Would you like to talk about your background?
Can they explain what's cooperative extension?
You can hear us now, Ebenezer?
What is cooperative extension?
I was actually gonna.
Okay.
And so,
Alright.
extension is the extended educational branch of the research-based institution, land grant university, which in North Carolina is NC State, NCANT, in the community. So in North Carolina, we have 100 extension offices, which is a cooperation between local county government and NC State and NCANT to extend the research-based knowledge that is being gleaned at the university, to extend it in community-based programming to the people, to the constituents through 3 areas: ag and natural resources, as Kathleen just mentioned, 4-H youth development, which is the world's largest youth development organization, and family and consumer sciences, which covers the areas of food preservation, preparation, chronic disease prevention, anything that has to do with what we used to think of as home economics. And extension looks a little bit different in our urban landscape than it does in the more rural landscape. But the programmatic efforts are still follow the same tripartite mission of the land grant university, which is extension research and community engagement.
Wow, thank you.
Is it fixed yet? Okay, all right. Okay, now I recognize you again.
Thank you. So I'm going to Kathleen and I are going to give everyone an update on our FY23 environmental sustainability report. You all should have paper slides in front of you. Some of the numbers are a bit small, but do stop us if we're going too fast. So of course, we're talking about Mecklenburg County, and this report is organized into 4 sections, similar to our ELAP: facilities and fleet, operations, natural environment, and policies and partnerships. First, we're going to dive into facilities. And so I want to call out a couple things at first. You'll see that right here for FY23 energy use, we don't have that from Duke Energy yet. We've been having issues getting data from them in a succinct, easy to get manner, but we do have our water information. So I want to give an update there. You'll see that there was an increase between FY22 and FY23 for water use, both in our total water use across the county, but then a slight increase in our buildings and a relatively large increase in our irrigation. I have reasoning for that, but I have to read my notes. So let's see. So first of all, Northern Regional Rec came online, as did Hal Marshall in FY23. Town Place Suites came online in FY23, and Marion Deal was being renovated in 22, but came back online to full capacity in FY23. So that, I believe that explains the increase in buildings between the 2 years. Separately, there were also, one more thing about Marion Deal. The pool was put back into operation in 23, so that'll up our water consumption for sure. There were also 2 water leaks at Ramsey Creek Park this summer, and then 1 on 4 Mile Creek Greenway last winter. And so those 3 things we think can attribute for the difference in irrigation between FY22 and FY23. Wanted to be sure I got all this right, folks. And then here on the right-hand side, these are just some projects that we completed in FY23. We're not going to go through them just because there's a lot of stuff to dive into, but if you have any questions, we can circle back and chat about them further. Moving into our fleet, we have in total 1,374 vehicles in our fleet, and 58 of those are EVs. We have 120 charging stations that are nearing the completion of installation. You'll see a photo right here of our one of our EV charging stations, and then one of our EVs that's charging in real time. In FY22, we saw, in FY23, we saw a decrease in diesel use, but an increase in unleaded fuel use. That's because when we got into FY23, we had our employees that were working full time. People were driving around to folks' homes, and we haven't phased out as many gasoline dependent vehicles and phased them in with EVs. We're doing that on a maintenance-based basis, if that makes sense. And moving into air quality, And also, if you have any questions about any of these, we've got our SMEs online, subject matter experts online that can answer questions. In FY23, our parts per billion for ozone compliance was below the what it needed to be for federal and state standards. We did reduce pollution by 1,215 tons via our GRADE program, which is amazing. This red box right here is about air quality action days. So there are days, I'm sure you've seen them, code orange days, when air quality advises employees to stay home if they can, not commute to lunch if they can, et cetera, et cetera. There was more air quality days on record this year, or last year rather, than we've ever had as the Work Green program has been in effect the last 10 years. And that's because of the wildfires in Canada for the most part. So we had 9 air quality action days last fiscal year. However, over 400 employees chose to either work from home or not commute to lunch or clean commute in some way during those days. And that's the most engagement we've ever had during air quality action days. That's great. And lastly, we logged over 350,000 miles of clean commutes by our employees, which is potentially higher than we've ever logged before. This is a deeper dive into our GRADE progress. You can see that we did complete a replacement of 7 trucks ranging from 2004, 2006 with new 2023 trucks, which these projects will reduce nearly 17 tons of nitrous oxide. Yes, over their 5-year activity lives. And in total, since the GRADE program began, we have worked towards decreasing our nitrous oxide by 1,215 tons, which is huge. That's amazing. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kathleen.
All right, going into waste management and operations. Solid waste management has some accomplishments from this past fiscal year. So landfill tonnage decreased by 10,000 tons between FY22 and FY23. Recycling tonnage increased by 3,000 tons. Yard waste tonnage increased by 8,000 tons. And the waste diversion rate, so what's being kept out of the landfill, that rate moved from 47% in FY22 to 48.8% in FY23. And they also have made some progress in making recycling and waste management more convenient and accessible for a lot of Mecklenburg County. The North Mech Drop Center was expanded. The unstaffed drop centers were redeveloped, and there was a full service recycling center brand new in the Steel Creek area. They also established a relationship between Park and Rec to start the Monroe Road Recycling Center in East Charlotte. So all of those are helping to make recycling more accessible and waste management more accessible. And then moving on to employee engagement, we have some really exciting things to share about the Work Green program. So there was nearly a 400 increase in employee participation. We moved from 559 staff participants to 941 staff participants in the Work Green program. And that represented 23 county departments. And the number of credits earned by these participants almost doubled between FY22 and 23. And that was really because of an increase in engagement, of promotion of the program. And there were 400 sustainability events that were held in FY23. And those include education opportunities, volunteer opportunities like stream and greenway cleanups, special initiatives like our air quality action days, and much more. So employees were very engaged on the environment and sustainability in FY23.
So moving into stormwater, we did want to highlight a few of the successes and challenges. Through the second year of the 15-year CIP program in stormwater. You'll see here, so in FY22, we restored 4.7 miles of streams. In FY23, we restored 3 miles of streams. In 22, we acquired 7 flood-prone properties. And then in FY23, Mike wasn't on. In FY23, we substantially increased the amount of flood-prone properties acquired to 17. In FY23, we mitigated roughly 9,400 flood risk points versus in FY23, we mitigated nearly 10,000, which is substantial increase from the 2 previous years. I do want to highlight groundwater in a really transparent way. So when we drafted the ELAP, gosh, 3-4 years ago now, groundwater wasn't really a part of that process. They just weren't. But this group in particular is very interested in what groundwater can do and does. And so we wanted to report on initiatives that are happening in groundwater. Namely, we want to highlight their successes and the work that they've done, but also as we get into our future years of revamping the ELAP in some way, fingers crossed, we'll include something in groundwater in that. So I just wanted to highlight them. You can see the data they provided us here, and then some successes are shared on the next slide. The text is a little hard to read, so sorry for that, but they are very education focused and like to keep folks up to date as to what can happen in their wells. And as we get further into land acquisition, in FY22, we acquired nearly 300 acres of our expanded green and open space, totaling 19.17 million. In FY23, we acquired nearly, not double that, but close to almost 500 acres in FY23, totaling $51.73 million. Of those acres, 362 were park acres, 100 were nature preserve, and 36.89 were greenways. And the map you see up here on this slide is for all FY23 land acquisitions. I mentioned this to Commissioner Powell earlier. In our June meeting, she requested that we get y'all like poster size of this map along with a poster size of the table for all of FY23. Those are being printed at Louisa today. So I'm going to pick them up and they'll be in your offices tomorrow. Lastly, we are committed to maintaining 19 acres per 1,000 residents of parkland. In FY22, we achieved that and we maintained a rate of 19.1 acres per 1,000 residents. In FY23, we maintained a rate of 19.2 acres per 1,000 residents. Now, I do want to say that doesn't seem like an enormous jump, right? We did some rough back of the envelope calculations, and that 1/10 of a, I'm going to say a point, 1/10 of a point equates roughly 500 additional acres of green and open space. So while it doesn't seem like a huge jump, in reality, it's quite significant. I'll pass it back to Kathleen.
Sure. Moving on to invasive species and our natural environment management. So in FY22, nearly 1,400 acres of within Mecklenburg County were treated for invasive species. We moved in FY23 to just over 1,000 acres. And that was because there was a slight drop because in FY23, the teams really focused their energy on properties that had high density of invasives, had multiple species of invasives, or in were areas that were a little bit more difficult to access. And so that significant small decrease between FY22 and 23 is because not all invasive species are quick and easy to treat. So the teams were working really hard to make sure that we're preserving and protecting that high quality land throughout Mecklenburg County. And this is an example, kind of a timeline photo of one specific piece of property at Latta Nature Preserve between 2020 and 2023. So you can see before treatment, it's quite dense with invasive species. 2021 after mechanical treatment, and then this was in 2023, just before the foliar treatment. So a lot of these spaces take multiple years to really manage and make sure we're properly protecting that land. Another piece of invasive species management and just natural environment management is prescribed fires. With all of the news and all of everything that's been going on with the massive fires in Canada and Hawaii, this is something that we know is really important to make sure that we're maintaining and protecting the urban environment that we have in Mecklenburg County. And prescribed fire is one way that we can control invasive species, remove fuel and hazardous conditions from our parkland so that we can reduce that risk of wildfire. So teams in FY23 burned or did prescribed fire with nearly 700 acres throughout the county. And then moving on to policies and partnerships. we wanted to highlight the work that our departments are doing to really engage citizens and residents throughout Mecklenburg County. So a few examples of that are stormwater outreach. So the Stormwater Services team sends an annual newsletter to residents who live within the regulated floodplain in Mecklenburg County. And this newsletter helps tell them about flood safety, flood mitigation, floodplain mapping and insurance, and other really important information that they need to know since they reside in those areas. So more than 6,000 property owners and renters living in these floodplains are reached through that newsletter. Air quality also has a great increase in the outreach that they're having in the community. So they moved in FY23 and had over 136,000 outreach impressions in FY23. And then solid waste management also has done a lot of work in community outreach. And that's social media accounts, TV, radio, billboards. And this is really promoting waste reduction, recycling, and no litter. And one way that we can highlight that is through their Facebook outreach impressions. And FY23, they had over 2.4 million outreach impressions just through that one social media channel. And that was a 41.1% increase in their outreach. The Recycle Right program, staying with solid waste management, continued their Recycle Right message in FY23, and that's in person and virtual. And there were a few highlights, and that includes the Recycle the Runway fashion show event, and then also annual holiday parade attendance in Cornelius and Davidson. And so that really helps increase awareness of recycling and waste reduction in the county. And another highlight of FY23 is stormwater services and how they were engaging our communities in FY23. So throughout this past fiscal year, they had nearly 4,500 volunteers who marked 2,100 storm drains, picked up 81,000 pounds of trash removed from the streams, and planted over 100 trees.
So with that, we'll transition back. With that, we'll transition back briefly to Livable Mech. So Livable Mech over the last fiscal year has formed 25 new partnerships with community organizations. We hosted 6 events with 60 community partners in attendance, a photo of which is on this slide right here. And Livable Mech is evolving to build connections between Mecklenburg County and other more diverse community partners throughout our county. We did want to highlight briefly the board bulletin. So over the last year, we use the board bulletin as a means to increase the diversity in terms of applicants for our vacancies on our advisory boards. I know that seems kind of in the weeds, but it actually worked. We had 14 vacancies across our advisory boards in FY23. 10 of those are now filled with a fairly diverse group of individuals. So it was effective. I'm not really going to get into too much detail about the farmland preservation plan. This group is versed in that particular subject. I will say once we had this plan endorsed by the Board of County Commissioners in March, we have been recruiting for a farmland preservation coordinator. We've got finalists that we've been interviewing this week, so it's exciting. And last but not least is we wanted to highlight the work that we did on the UDO. As this group knows, we worked tirelessly over about a year to pull comments from some departments. You'll see in the bottom of this slide together. I think we pulled, it was nearly 70 comments in total that we sent over to the city to be included in their Unified Development Ordinance. We have 2 outstanding comments that we're still working through. We hope to be resolved by the end of this fiscal year, but everything else was incorporated into the UDO in some fashion. And so with that, we'll take any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Altman.
I would like for this to be put on an agenda for the full board to hear. I don't think even commissioners understand the breadth and scope of your achievements, of your team's achievements. It is amazing. And I think also that a press release should be prepared for the general public, but also directed specifically to the Honorable David Borax of WFAE. with an invitation maybe to interview you or our chairwoman. Because this just needs to be appreciated. It's, taxpayer dollars and, oh, you're here. Thank you, Mr. Borax. I was lamenting in my heart that you were missing this. And I am impressed and happy that you're here, sir. So I look forward to you covering this. Because this is, A+. I am so proud and grateful for all your work. Thank you.
Do you have any questions? Yeah. Commissioner Rodriguez McDowell.
Yeah, no, I really don't have any questions besides one, and the one is, in the name of sustainability, can we not have these printed papers? And just have them, in PDF format, because I just think, this is sustainability right here, people. So I think we should demonstrate how we can be really efficient and use our iPads or whatever.
We'll gladly migrate if that's what the director of the committee does. If not, what we do is this becomes part of the recycling. We put it in recycle for reuse in other products, but we'll gladly open to do that if that's what you want us to do.
Well, for me anyway.
Yeah, I can be.
Paperless. But I too want to say, I love all the metrics and the, comparisons, and I think it really illustrates progress, which is what we all want. And so thank you for making it clear and I think really digestible. And so I agree with Commissioner Altman. I think it would be great to get the word out to a greater, public about this. So thank you.
The one thing I'll add, since you mentioned that, is that one of the other aspirations that we're striving for is that we eventually also want to create, and maybe we'll be more successful in this coming fiscal year, is move towards a dashboard so that there's multiple ways for information to be received. This is one mode. It's a quick snapshot. It gives you a narrative, but we also would like to be able to give you multi-year data that you won't ever be able to see in a snapshot way. So we're looking towards moving towards that as another means of information, not the sole means, but another means.
Yeah, that's great. And if I could just say one more comment, I really think that it's the strength of our chairwoman in this committee that has, it really matters to have a chairwoman with expertise. And I am just so grateful that we have you, because if we didn't, I know the results wouldn't be the same. No offense to anyone on staff, but I think it takes an expertise from our chairwoman that really has pushed the envelope on this. So I appreciate your expertise.
Thank you. Commissioner Jarrell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for the update. With respect to parkland access, I gotta go there for just a second. So we're at 19 acres per 1,000 residents. And so, every year we do this deal with TPL where they come out with, their score. And I understand it's not apples to apples, but where do they say we're supposed to be?
So Trust for Public Lands goal is to have every resident within a 10-minute walk of public open space. Ultimately, that's what our goal is now. That's what is stated in MEC playbook. And then we tied kind of the acres per 1,000 residents from MEC playbook to the Environmental Leadership Action Plan. So those are shared. Right now, I think we're at 38% or so access. That's up, I think, 2% from a couple of years ago. So we're getting there. It's going to take a long time to be able to do that between our parks, our nature preserves, and our greenway trails, all of which are considered public open space. Ultimately, that's where we're looking to go. Within MEC playbook, we've got 17 kind of gap areas that we're focusing in on. And so you'll notice over the last 2 to 3 years, the lands that we have purchased specifically for parklands have been within those areas. And we're doubling down on 5 or 6 of those gap areas this year in our acquisition efforts, where we haven't had successes or been able to acquire land over the last couple of years. So we're working toward that, focusing in on first those areas that we consider priority communities, and then working out from there.
And what's the, two other things, what's the biggest disconnect, or I don't even want to say disconnect, what is the main difference between, you know, the way and I know Dr. Johnson has addressed this, but I just want to kind of make sure the community understands. There are differences in some of their expectations with respect to some of the limitations that we encounter from a community perspective. What are some of those differences that we've talked about in the past?
So I'll start and then you can hitch a ride to what I'm going to articulate. I think at the 100,000-foot view, we do well for Trust for Public Land as it relates to the amount of acres that we have in our community. I think the gap, as referenced, is can we have them within a certain distance from the resident's home or access? I think that's where we see our biggest challenge. The second piece of that is that they also look at access as it relates to minorities. So they look at it as a whole, and they look at it to MWS. I'm in a small business, I'm in an economic development space. Do minorities have equal access as well, right? So if you look at our statistics, I guess we're equitable. There's a gap for all as well as a gap for minority. Because of that, we get dinged twice. If we didn't have it as a for all, we're not going to also have it for minorities. So we tend to not show up like some of our other communities. What I would also say is, and the chair, Commissioner Powell, lobbies and advocates that when we do parkland, we want it to be sizable so that we can have different types of amenities on there. An example that I'll use in the District of Columbia, my mom has in the next block remnant land that's just a triangle piece that's 1/10 of an acre.
Right.
And she gets, and the Trust for Public Land counts that as a park. The next neighboring park still is within a mile, but which is a larger size, but they get to count 2 things of amenities. And as there's more development, we probably will start having to have more strategies that show these urban parklets as opposed to how we have already operationalized as a park. The last thing that I would articulate or share would be that there's a component of Trust for Public Land that looks for certain types of amenities. And there are some foundational amenities that we want to have, basketball courts, playgrounds, right? But we also, well, if we would say pickleball isn't in the Trust for Public Lands amenities, right? And so what we're doing is we, through our community engagement, listen to our community and put in amenities that are of interest for them. So if they don't want a splash park, or if they don't want this, that, and the other, we're not going to put it, but they are the amenities that are being searched for the Trust for Public Land. And I get it, they're trying to have an equitable measurement across the nation. And the last thing that I will say is being reviewed by the Trust for Public Land is voluntary. So we continue to say, yes, you go ahead and evaluate us. There's some communities that choose not to, right? And so they could be worse off than us, but we don't see them because they're opting not to participate. Bert, you can add whatever else you want to add.
I think you did a pretty good job.
Well, thank you. Y'all train me well.
So the last thing I want to just say is I want to shout out Stormwater, because I think the community engagement with respect to the volunteers is just awesome. I love it. I love to see when people are out in the community and we have our vests or the boots to wade in the creeks and all that stuff. And I just think it's a great way to keep the community informed and engaged and really to add that extra layer of value. So thank you.
Thank you. And it may show up, but, and I just want to make sure it is clear. And I know, we're the messengers. We're sharing you the successes of our team. And it's some of the people that show up here virtually. There's a few people that are here with us today, but it goes further down in the organization that we have an awesome group of people that are passionate about the work that we do in the space of environmental stewardship, and the commending and the success and the applause isn't us. It's further throughout the organization. So, thank you.
I agree. There's so many things I want to say. I feel like this part could just go on for 4 hours. Like it's not a joke. I'm not kidding. And so I think the questions I have about waste management, we'll just put onto a different agenda. But just to say it out loud, the waste diversion rate, I want to know like what that encompasses. Because, 48.8 seems so big. But I see so much still going to the landfills. And so I just want to know how that was determined, especially since we don't have composting. And then to add to it, like just the fact of what Commissioner Altman and Commissioner Rodriguez McDowell said, when we were elected in 2018, there was no such thing as this. And so I learned the other day that we are the only county in the Catawba River Basin that has an environmental stewardship committee at the county level. And the work that is here is such a great beginning. And so what I want to say like about, I'm really glad about seeing the groundwater in here because it matters. Like there's so many things about water quality that we talk about, but water capacity with the population that we serve today, let alone what's coming. Does the tiny little Catawba River have that capacity? And so groundwater is so important for recharge. Like, we really need to think not just of stormwater management, but of groundwater. And so that's one thing. Like I'm looking in the future of the ELAP, and I think that we need to be putting our minds together to make it better, not like down the road, but very soon in the coming weeks. How do we do better with groundwater? How do we do better protecting these assets? I came from a conference in Raleigh where very bipartisan, we need to protect the green space that we have. And they were pushing the importance of conservation easements in all of our green space, but especially our nature preserves and our farmland. And so I think I shared some of that with you, but we need to be looking at that. How do we protect our investments? These are big investments. And also like not like in the stormwater, everything was so great, except only 138 trees were planted. Like, how do we do better with that? And not decreasing our goals as the population increases, 19 to 23. I remember back when it was 26 and Chris, maybe it was higher at one point than 26 per thousand. Do you remember?
I don't recall it being higher.
Because I remember when it was 26 and now when I say 19 and it's so hard to say at 19, if we need more funding for land acquisition, we're preparing for more. I mean, we're supposed to be fully built out in 7 years. And so 7 years, we've been here 5. It went by like that. And so, these are just things on my mind. How do we do better? We have to have an environmental leadership action plan. We have made this a top priority for the board. We cannot lose that. It's not like a fluff. We have to do it. So these are the things that are really on my mind. And so I'm glad that we're going to lead into an urban farm project. So if there's no more, do you have another question? Commissioner Altman.
The prescribed fire, I think you said that this past year you had a controlled burn of 700 acres. So who is advising us on that to know that we are ensuring that there are no remaining pathways for fire to run amok and reach our resident like we saw in Hawaii?
Yeah, so we work closely with the Forest Service on these efforts. So we have the North Carolina Forest Service has agents that are within the county and within the region. So we work with them. And with prescribed fire, we're only allowed to do it in certain areas. So we have limited ability to do it like within the city limits of Charlotte. So we're looking at other locations, large nature preserves that are on the periphery that are adjacent to neighborhoods. So Lada is a really good example, kind of out near where Lane lives. We have neighborhoods that butt up to the nature preserve. And so what we do is we remove the dead wood and the fuel and whatnot from the nature preserve so that if something were to happen, like a lightning strike or something like that, it doesn't migrate into the neighborhood. So we focus on those areas where we have the interface between the urban environment, like a neighborhood, and a large open space.
But have we looked at the entire county without regard to what we control or what might be easier from a population standpoint, but just from a strictly risk analysis for the whole county, including our urban areas?
So perhaps the Forest Service has done that, but within Park and Rec, we're really just focused on our Park and Rec properties.
I would like to know if anyone does that. It seems like we should, with these record heat temperatures and the catastrophes that we've been witnessing, we should find out, does anybody look at that? And if not, maybe we should, pursue that a little bit further.
So we'll reach out to the Forest Service and talk to them and find out a little bit more about what their analysis, what they are, what they do, what they look at, and we'll be glad to get back to you. Sure.
And I thought of two more things to add to the next environmental leadership, like how we make it better. There is a hyper focus right now in the Waste Management Advisory Board for composting. And so I think that somehow we need to include composting in our future waste minimization. And I'm glad that Dr. Johnson was talking about parklets, because it'll be a sad day when we start to rely on parklets for teeny little tiny place. It'll be a sad day when that counts as like something significant beyond tree canopy. A real park is not some tiny little false promise from a developer. So we all know what happens to them. We've seen it in Philadelphia and Baltimore and Washington, D.C. So we don't want to be that. And also waste minimization is, we're seeing a lot of, Commissioner Jarrell, remember that we were with the youth and they were telling us that they see all the recycling going into the trash. So I think I know how to say like, that's not trash in every language. No basura. Like we keep seeing recycling going into the trash. And we have this whole infrastructure already set up at CMS. How do we get it to, even here in this building, we have the infrastructure, but it keeps going in the trash. So I don't know if you guys have seen, but I take pictures like of the dumpster downstairs with all the recycling in it and then send them to Aaron and Jeff Smithberger. Anyway, these are things that, we're Mecklenburg County. We have the infrastructure. We need to do better. And so hopefully like make the plan stronger. All right, now it's your turn again to introduce our next presentation.
Certainly. So next we have Terry Stowers from Park and Rec and Dr. Barbara Worley with Cooperative Extension to talk about the Amy James Agriculture Park. So I'll turn it over to them.
Hello again. Thank you for inviting us here to talk about a very exciting project that we're very excited about. First, we introduced ourselves when we went around the table, but I wanted to tell you that Cooperative Extension is actually a part of Park and Rec. There's only 2 places in the country where Cooperative Extension is a part of Park and Rec. Us in Jacksonville, Florida, we were first, and we really benefit from this partnership and working very closely together. And the rec centers and a lot of stuff that we do, we work together on. Next slide. I always like to start a presentation by talking about who the facility is named after. A lot of times we go to our facilities and who's Betty Ray Thomas? You know, who's this? So I want to introduce you to Miss Amy James. She was actually born and raised here in Brooklyn Village, where we sit here in Charlotte. She was a teacher for Charlotte-Mecklenburg, well, Charlotte schools at the time. And she was noted for being able to control the boys. So they put all the bad boys in her class and she had them play instruments and all those kind of things. I've read so many stories about her and what an influence she was to the community. In the 1920s, she started doing Sunday school in her class, in her home. And then when they became formally organized in 1942, they actually started the Amy James Presbyterian Church on West Boulevard, which was the first Black Presbyterian church in Mecklenburg County. Went on to street. Amy James Street is named after her. There's a school that's now known as Niner University at Amy James, but it was originally Amy James Elementary School. And the park, as well as the recreation center, is named after Miss Amy. Next slide. I kind of put this here just to kind of orient you where Amy James Park is in case you're not sure. The main street, I thought I'd have a pointer. The main street coming down that you see is Billy Graham Parkway, and then you have West Boulevard going across the bottom. And then where Tyvola Road crosses over Billy Graham and actually comes next to the property and comes down to West Boulevard. And then Amy James Park sets right in the middle there. Bert's going to point it out for me. Right in the middle there. That's Amy James Park. Also, next slide. I also like to talk a little bit about the communities that we're in to give you kind of a background of the Amy James or Reed Park community. In the quality of life study, it shows a median household income of $35,000. The median age is 26, with 36% being under the age of 18. 72% African American. Education, 75% have high school diplomas and 13% have bachelor's degrees. Next slide. 47% own their own homes, and 50% are rentals with an average of $792 a month, and 23% receive housing assistance. Next. Health indicators. 42% of the residents receive public health insurance, 47% food and nutrition services. Now, the closest full service grocery store is 2 miles away, which really doesn't sound like a lot. It's the Walmart over on Wilkinson. However, if you want to get there by bus, it's going to take you about 45 minutes. It's 7/10 of a mile from the actual park over to a bus stop, 25-minute ride. And then you're going to take your groceries back on the bus with you. So it is rather far. Let's talk a little bit about the park itself. So the park is 44 acres. It was owned by Charlotte Utilities. And then in 1977, the city of Charlotte received a $1.1 million community block grant. And they decided to build a park, an amazing park for the time, for the West Boulevard corridor. As you guys can probably see better on your slide there, it has a recreation center. It has what they call the Human Resource Center at the time, which I think is the first CRC, I think, because it actually had health department in there. DSS was in there. All of those services were right there on in the annex, what we call the annex. And then a traditional recreation center with a gym, 3 classrooms, a stage. And then out in the park behind it, which is totally amazing, it had basketball courts, tennis courts. There was horseshoe pit, shuffleboard, trails. There's actually 2 entrances to the park in the back. It was just, someone found an article and sent it to me the other day about when the park opened and how excited the community was about that park. Well, in 1992, the city and the county park and rec departments merged. I reached out to some former employees because I'm like, what happened? You know, what happened to this park? And they told me in 92, when they were out walking the properties, that we received from the city, this park was already abandoned. It had already been grown over. They weren't using it anymore. They had to set some priorities, and Amy James just was not one of the priorities that the county set at the time. I've been with the county since '97, and I don't remember it being anything back there other than a place that you did not want to go behind the facility. Well, in 2010, with the recession, Park and Recreation had to make some hard decisions, and we decided to close 4 of our recreation centers. Amy James was one of the facilities that we decided to close. Because of its close proximity to Southview and Arbor Glen recreation centers, we felt like we were serving the needs of that community at those 2 facilities. My office was actually in the annex in 2010 when we closed. So in 2014, CMS approached the county about using the center. At the time, Reed Park Academy was a K-8 school, and they needed somewhere to play middle school basketball for the teams to practice and things. So we leased the buildings to CMS in 2014. 2020, I heard the word on the street was CMS wasn't using it anymore. Now the lease went through 2023. So in 2020, I asked Jacqueline to look into it, Jacqueline McNeil, and Jacqueline was able to get in touch with CMS. They said, no, they weren't using it anymore. And I said, well, we want it back because it's such a great asset. And at the time also, I was looking for a better building for cooperative extension than the Armory. So it was the perfect place. Having my office been over there, I knew it was a great place that we could move cooperative extension over there. Next, along comes the equity funding. Thank you very much. The equity funding. So we were able to use $850,000 of equity funding to reactivate the recreation center and to provide a new home for cooperative extension. We addressed the ADA issues with the parking lot and the entrances. We did accessibility and fencing of an impervious surface behind the building for demonstration gardens, and made sure we had the sidewalks to go to it to be accessible. And then asset and facility management came in and installed air conditioning in the gymnasium. Next. So we moved cooperative extension over there actually in July of 2022, and then we reopened the recreation center in March of 2023. New look, it's amazing. What we're able to do. The picture up in the upper right-hand corner is actually the fenced in part in the back of the building where we're going to put community garden, demonstration gardens, a greenhouse, and all that's already been purchased for back there. Next, okay, so a grant opportunity came across my desk one day. And I had been talking to Mamie Harris, who is the Food Security Program Manager with Public Health, about some funding they had to introduce farming to minorities, and about, you know, what kind of, where can we put it? What kind of park can we put? So Mamie and I have been talking about this for a while as we crossed paths in different meetings. So this grant came up, and I thought, I wonder if we can turn that 44 acres behind Amy James Rec Center into an urban agriculture park. So I went to Bert, my counterpart, and said, hey, do you have someone that can help me write this grant? And he did. He assigned one of his staff to help us write the grant. We applied for the grant in July of 2021. Didn't get it the first time. Then they called us up and said, hey, we have some extra ARPA funding. Are you guys still interested? So in May of 2022, we actually got the funding to do this. You know, the goals for this urban agriculture park is to address significant issues plaguing the areas of Mecklenburg County, such as food deserts, socioeconomic disparities, physical inactivity, and the linking growing number of health-related issues. We're going to complete a master plan with the primary benefit of the surrounding area. So mainly focus on the surrounding area around it. and to elevate market barriers to address the community's food insecurity and address them by creating a food business incubator and on-site farm at the Amy James Park location. So in spring of 2023, we hired McAdams to lead the design team. McAdams actually formed together a really good team. I was kind of concerned. I'm like, this is something new we've never done. We've worked with McAdams a lot, but how are they going to know an urban agriculture park? So they actually have brought Dwayne Jones onto the planning team. He is the Dean of the College of Agriculture, Urban Sustainability and Environmental Sciences at the University of District of Columbia. And then they've also brought on Pros Consulting to do the business plan after we've master planned the park. So we hired the design team, and then summer 2023, we took a little road trip towards DC, visited 7 different properties in Richmond, Durham, Cary, and DC. And to just kind of get an idea of what's out there and what other people are doing. Starting actually our first steering committee meeting is going to be on the 27th of this month. So in winter 2023, we hope to have the master planning and schematic design, also complete the business plan, and then spring of 2024 presentations and approval process for the master plan. Next. So as we were visiting these sites, we found a few key themes that really resonated with us. And I'm going to let Barbara speak to the themes and how we can relate it to the Amy James site.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. So as Terry said, we abductively, the strategic planning team that was put together that you saw in the photo when we took the trip, came up with these kind of 6 key areas. And the first one being education. Next slide. So as I spoke when we were answering the question, what exactly is extension? Well, the mission of cooperative extension is to extend research-based knowledge to all North Carolinians. And it does this to help transform science into everyday solutions that improves their lives and grows our state. North Carolina Cooperative Extension, which is North Carolina State University and North Carolina A&T, is the trusted go-to resource for connecting research and education to communities, economies, and families of our state, which cultivates prosperity for all North Carolinians. And so that's what we want to use this part for, is to provide a space for education. And it's going to be the largest of its kind, centralized within a city limits, within a metropolitan area. There's no other place like it. I was at NUEL, which is the National Urban Extension Leadership Conference in Houston recently, speaking with the director of extension for Nashville. He was like, well, we have 45 acres. I said, we have 44, but they're actually in Murfreesboro. They're not in Nashville, so they don't count. So they're actually adjacent. I was like, you're really not in an urban area. And so this would provide the local community to be engaged in educational programs that are going to be led by university extension field faculty, such as myself, staff, and our wonderful group of volunteers, like our extension master gardeners, which we have a very strong group of 170 and growing in the areas of urban ag, food systems, entrepreneurship, and ecology. Yep. So the 3-part mission of the land grant university includes teaching, providing service to communities, and conducting research. So the Amy James Urban Agriculture Park will provide a space where research can be conducted in a real world scenarios under natural conditions. And these collaborative efforts can include other universities, including R1 institutions, as well as community partner organizations, which will establish the park as a premier research center. A business incubator is the next theme that we identified. And as you all are aware, we are in an urban environment. And so having an area to cultivate products to grow food is necessary, and it's a very limited resource. And this is taking it beyond the concept of just our community gardens. We're going to be cultivating more. So centralized as a center supported by education and research, affordable and culturally appropriate food products can be cultivated and grown in response to those community-based needs and those that are driven by the community and what they desire. Next.
So those three preceding themes to, education, research, and incubator lead us to the theme and a very, very pertinent issue of food access. And so 14.9% of Mecklenburg County residents are food insecure. Barriers to access, though, include individual and environmental factors. Some consumers have limited purchasing power and access to other resources, as well as restricted knowledge about local foods. Food access is also determined by the food environment, which refers to the availability or affordability of food within an individual's surroundings. And our state and our local and federal policies, as well as the norms of communities, determine what food is available at what outlets and at what price. So this urban ag park can help this important issue by providing a space where individuals can learn agricultural entrepreneurship skills, thus bolstering their ability to grow food as a business and or for personal need. The center also can serve as a space where people can see the linkages in the various career pathways in our food systems. From growing to buying, preparing to serving, when you're doing anything with food, fiber, or the environment, you are actually participating in agriculture. As I like to always say, it's not just sows, cows, and plows. The next. So land, and we've already spoken a lot about, thank you, Aaron and Kathleen, about land conservation and conservation in general, but this land preservation rather is important for environmental health and maintaining quality of life. And the park will demonstrate environmental stewardship practices and ecosystem resiliency. It'll provide a space for education and research programs through partnerships with other organizations and educational institutions for preservation and protection of our environment. And we will demonstrate things like Terry showed, the basketball court area. We already have a space designated for demonstrating composting and capturing and the use of rainwater, which this was a site that UDC actually had demonstrating something they had won some national awards for. And then the final theme is community. And that's why we're all here. And that's why we're here today, is to make our communities better. The third part of the tripartite model, the land grant university, is extension, and that is community engagement. As I noted before, we extend our research-based education to the communities we serve. And the Amy James Urban Agricultural Park is to be created with intention as a special space that sparks wonder and joy. We envision an inviting, inclusive, and welcoming space that reflects the values and experiences of the community at large. And so as you see, these themes are actually not independent of one another. This is a multifaceted approach to develop an integrated rather than siloed, and sorry for that terrible agricultural pun there, collaborative effort to address pertinent issues and meet the needs of Mecklenburg County. And at the end, and this is where my research for my PhD came in, is agriculture, I like to operationalize as it equals food and culture. And so that's the theme and that's the vision that we have in my office at NC Cooperative Extension, NC State University Extension here in Mecklenburg County, is when we think about urban ag and we think about urban ag spaces, is how can we address food issues within Mecklenburg County and attending to the culture of our residents. Terry?
Yep. So additional funding, again, participatory budgeting, thank you. We will be using some of the community garden funding for participatory budgeting on this side, as well as edible landscapes. There will also be a technology lab at this space in the annex, where we will be doing some workforce development and some other things on site. Received ARPA funding for an accessible playground. So there will be a totally accessible playground on site. We are operating our therapeutic recreation programs out. They held summer camp there this year. We'll be doing adult day programs out of this, as well as blended out into the community. So the recreation center itself operates with therapeutic programs during the day, and then a traditional recreation center nights and weekends with traditional programming. Next. The another exciting thing for this site is the extension of Irwin Creek Greenway from Clanton Road to Lester Street, which is the street that Amy James is on. It costs $7 million. We have received a North Carolina Department of Transportation grant for 4.8 million. It did not get in this cycle of CIP, but it is a high priority for FY29 to be able to bring the greenway not only to the site, but up into the site as well. Next. I wanted to take this opportunity while I had you here to invite you to a grassroots empowerment reception that we are hosting along with North Carolina A&T. A&T has a new focus, that's over urban extension office. They have actually, and so they're really looking how to engage the urban environment with extension. So there's this reception, and then following that is actually going to be a seminar at the Harris campus of Central Piedmont. So I've sent this to go to all the county commissioners, but I want to extend a personal invitation for you to come to Cordelia Park Indoor Shelter and see what the possibilities with extension here in Mecklenburg County. Next. Now we're open for any questions that you may have.
So let me see what time it is. Oh, we're good. The first thing that I want to say is thank you, Terry, for your outstanding leadership. I think I've known you since the day you came to Mecklenburg County, and you have led with intelligence, respect for others, like identifying the strengths in everyone that you work with, supporting a team, leading with love for 27 years. I'm sure you led with love before that. And all the challenges that you face, like I think of all the things that I've seen you, and I want like my colleagues to know like what an exceptional human being you are, because it is, community is your heart. And you have, I'm really happy you found Dr. Worley. And I remember I had to call her for something when you were traveling back from Washington and you were so excited about this. And so I'm glad to see all this. But I have like seen you have to deal with things as minuscule as mutt mitts, like not enough mutt mitts, and here you come. Like, and you never say it's not my job. Like you are so committed to making sure that everybody has what they need. And one time we were at an event 20 some years ago, and the kids were getting prizes at this event, but they didn't even want a prize. They just wanted some water, and the water fountains weren't working. And so you and I together got them water. And I thought, like, what a sad day when, you know, the water fountains aren't working. And it was like, and I'm thinking that was probably when Park and Rec was just not funded. It was cut to the hip. But through all of the challenges, you just have always been so positive and responsive to the community. And I appreciate you. Like, I'm so glad that you're here. And I don't know if you guys know her title, but she is the director of all of our recreation centers and cooperative extension and anything else. Like, I just know you're a great person to call when we need to solve a problem. So thank you for that. And Commissioner Drell was writing a lot, so I think I think he might want to go first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. A few things, and I'll spit everything out and let you all respond. But I was really excited about this for a lot of different reasons. One, I really love the fact that you hit all our hot buttons. When you're talking about grassroots, when you're talking about community engagement, when you're talking about food insecurity and ways to solve, that is really important. You hit priority areas for the board. So kudos to you. Also, the background on Amy James is really, really important. So we know who Arthur Griffin's class, whose class he was in when when he was coming up. But-
That was his teacher?
No, I'm just,
Oh.
I'm just kidding. She said, yeah, she had all the problem kids, all the bad kids. But no, I think that background and that context is really important. And for you to do that level of research to really illustrate where we've been historically, where we are now, but where we're trying to go. I thought that was a beautiful linkage throughout this presentation, and it speaks volumes for about you. One, I'd like to know about what will the community engagement look like. I loved how you talked about culturally appropriate food. I don't think you used appropriate, but for lack of a better word, the culturally appropriate food. So I want to understand what that community feedback looks like. How much input will the community have? Obviously, we have a pretty significant number of younger folks in that community, 38% you guys teed up with 10% of our seniors. So I want to know, what does that feedback loop look like? How will we engage? Is there any sort of connection to CMS to engage with them as well, and any other community stakeholders that we'll have? But I definitely want to learn more about the Food Biz Incubator at some point. So I would love to be invited out to really take a deeper dive into that discussion. So thank you.
Yeah. So community engagement wise, we realize how important it's going to be to have the West Boulevard Coalition at the table, as well as the Reed Park Neighborhood Association. They have been invited to our to be on the steering committee. We're getting ready to have that meeting this month. And to realize, I think the biggest thing that I want them to, that we want to come in and do this project with you, not for you. We want you to be a part of that. And that's some of the things that we saw on our, when we did our little tour, was when the community was so involved. There was a site that was right next to one of the worst housing projects in DC, right there. And Dwayne Jones told us they have absolutely no problems at that site because it's the community's site, that the community has ownership of it. And we really, really want to do that. And we want, as far as getting the kids involved, they'll definitely help us plan that playground. Also looking to, you know, the whole site, the children's education parts. We're really, we've got a unique opportunity there, because not only is there Reed Park Elementary School, which we've been talking to the principal there, but also the Amy James School is a lab school for UNC Charlotte. So, so they're able to do some really unique curriculum there because they're a lab school. So we talk about, and now it's not just a rec center, and it's a complex. And we're going to all work together in this complex to make sure that we're serving the needs of all ages. And really, I saw on the news where the Seven Sisters Market got some funding. So excited to work with them. We have talked to them. Reggie Singleton, who is with Public Health, is on our steering committee. He's been involved since we applied for the grant. So Reggie's very much, yeah, Mel's Place, yeah.
Mel's Place, right.
Yeah, so he's excited about this. I just think it's unlimited possibilities with what we can do there.
I mean, it's a legacy project. It's big. Commissioner Altman?
I don't have anything to add to what Commissioner Durrell said, what she said so well. I am so thrilled. This is exactly the kind of program we're looking for. So thank you.
Commissioner Rodriguez-McDowell?
Thank you. Yeah, so Commissioner Durrell definitely said it so well about how beautifully you told the story, and it just really reveals so much about the leadership that you're bringing to the project. So thank you for that. But I have a bit of a question that I think, because I want to be able to explain it and be able to understand it. You know, if the original park was built in 1977, and I think you said by like maybe 12 or 15 years later, it was already overgrown and abandoned. I need someone to sort of color it in for me. How does it get from that state to that state in that short of a period of time? And like, how do we know that the community will, if you build it, they will come now?
Our native Charlottean here, but you know, that's the thing I asked. I was like, how did this happen? How did we go from this park that everyone was so excited about? And then when we came back, we actually built Reed Park, which is across the street from the center that has basketball and community garden and all that stuff recently. But that's the $1 million question that I've asked everybody, and everybody that would listen to me. I said, how did this happen? How did this go from a vibrant community place to being overgrown within 15 years? Chris?
Yeah, so we we really don't have time to go into the whole full story, but to summarize it, the city of Charlotte built this park. When I was growing up, I participated in the city of Charlotte summer park programs as well. And we used to play Amy James' baseball team over at Freedom Park. So they would take community, your neighborhood park, all the kids would go there. And then they had programs all over the city. And we used to get our butts kicked by Amy James like every single year over at Freedom Park. But it's important to understand that the city was responsible for this park and the county didn't receive it until 1992. So when we received this park, it was already in a state of disrepair. Why it happened, what decisions the city made surrounding that, I don't really know. But it was obvious that it was really challenging for the county to now take this facility over and to put a lot of resources into it because we had received every neighborhood park in the entire city all at one time, in addition to all the parks that the county was already running as the Park and Rec department back then. So it was a super heavy lift. I doubt that the county received enough funding to adequately manage the type of park system that we got at the time. And so the decision makers at that time had to make some pretty hard decisions about facilities. And unfortunately, it seems like Amy James was one of those that just kind of went by the wayside. And without the vision that Terry had, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. So it's that whole story of how city parks were and how they came to be and where they are now are exactly why MEG Playbook is the way it is, and this commitment to reinvestment into these equity areas. So we can have this conversation again, but it's a long, pretty heavy lift to have that talk about why it happened.
Well, thank you for that. If anybody knows a resource like a book or, a documentary or something like that, that sort of explains, because I really would love to understand better how, like, if the area still had all the homes around it, and like help me make the case or help me understand how investment, in the park is going to, not that I don't believe it, but just so that I can articulate it better. I understand if park benches are broken and it's not painted and there's, that it's not very fun to go there if it's dilapidated, but is that it? Is that why the neighborhood abandoned it? Or, and if we have another park across the street, the Reed Park, like this is an area I'm not familiar with. I haven't driven around, but I really want to understand how, why do you build another park across the street? And then if this park is dilapidated, like, I don't get it.
I think it's because this is a little bit different because it's got the research and educational component because it's tied to the university. So the park is the structure, but the programmatic efforts are going to be implemented by the university through cooperative extension. And so that's where I think it looks a little bit different. And the way, and I liked that question, which is a very valid one, and it would be one that your constituents would ask you, well, how do you know if you build it, they'll come? And it comes down to basic needs assessment, which is how we devise all of the programmatic efforts that we do anyway. We don't just say, oh, I want to teach this program because I think it's cool and fun. It's all based on what is needed by the community. And it's just like Terry's vision, even for this to begin, came based on the needs of those partner organizations, for example, that she mentioned that she was working with. Hey, we need a space where we can teach how to get these business incubators, beginning farmers as Mecklenburg County continues to get developed, farmland's going away. How can we get this off the ground? Because farming doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be on 10 acres. I mean, you can have vertical operations, indoor operations, all sorts of different operations. Food is food, agriculture equals food and culture. So we needed a space in order to do that. So that a need assessment was already done there. And then as we engage the community through a qualitative needs assessment process, which is in the next line of things that we're going to be doing with Dr. Jones from UDC, is those are listening sessions that we have. Is we don't say that, oh, these are the structures we want on the park. It's based on what the community envisions and what they need is going to drive what we see as having. So right now it's a blank canvas. There are things that we see that could be facets of that, but how that actually is going to look is going to be 100% based on and built based on what the community needs. I mean, we know that there's food insecurity issues. Definitely. We know that we do need things to be culturally relevant to, because if I grow this and it's not culturally relevant to those around me, it's useless. It's not going to be accessible. So that's something that we see this space being.
Wow, thank you. That is really
Yeah.
helpful.
Okay, good.
It really is. Thank you.
So I have a couple things to say. And I'm glad that Chris reminded everyone that it was under the city's possession. But who is elected matters. What our priorities are matter. If environmental stewardship wasn't a top priority, we wouldn't be sitting here. We wouldn't have the funding to do what matters. And so, the county manager has 9 bosses. And we're 4 of them. And the board agrees with the environmental leadership action plan. And we have directed really a great momentum. And I'm really happy that you had this vision, Terry. She also is over therapeutic recreation. So I was thinking of the time we were together at Race Place. But in Raleigh, where we all go to different sessions, the session I was in, we were talking about loss of farmland in North Carolina throughout the entire state, but especially in urban areas, and how that impacts resilience. And it's really, it's not just a county priority, it's a regional priority, but it's not just regional, it's state. We are number 2 in the nation for loss of farmland. And we have a significant chunk in my district, so I'm really paying attention to what is left. But not only are we losing farmland, we're losing the skill of farmers. And so to have this little incubator, which is, you call it little, and 44 acres in Mecklenburg County is huge. So just thank you for your vision, your enthusiasm, your dedication, everything. I'm excited about this. And I want everyone to remember that I tried to get Irwin Creek into the CIP multiple times. I tried really hard. So hopefully it'll be in the rolling CIP. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else, but there will be a day, and it's sad that people don't realize it yet, where the loss of farmland has really impacted the local resilience. And you think that we would have learned it in COVID. You think people would get it. But the farmland preservation and this project are so important. So if there's nothing else. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Commissioner Jarrell.
I just, as we went through this presentation, I couldn't help but to think about that. I think it's really important to illustrate or underscore that, you know, we're not here meeting just for the sake of meeting, like having another meeting added onto the calendar. And one of the things that I really truly believe is that we should constantly be learning, understanding, yes, tough decisions were made 30 years ago or 40 years ago, but what are we learning from that? Because when you look at the disparities and the gaps that we have to deal with and we're cleaning up because as a result of the decisions that were made for whatever reasons and who those decisions impacted, they really didn't help our cause today for what we have to do. And so what are we learning from that? What do we take away from these situations? And I hope that in all of our committees, when we get this information, it helps us to make better decisions, to be forward thinking, to know that the decisions that we're making have nothing to do with 2023. I say this all the time, it has to do with 2043 and 2053. And so who's going to be sitting at this dais 30 years from now saying, hey, those commissioners back in 23, they made this particular decision and here's the outcomes. Either it help the disparity or it's going to exacerbate the disparity. And the same people that we're trying to help, it's going to take a tremendous amount of not only human resources, but financial resources to be able to try to close those gaps. And at that point, we don't know where we'll be. So again, I just want to just illustrate that for the public, you know, these meetings are very, very serious. Leadership is very, very serious. We're not just patting Commissioner Powell on the back because, you know, we like her, but it's because of the leadership that she's exhibited and where she's driving us towards, and the same with staff. So I just wanted to just highlight that, and I thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you. And you told us the other night you're going to be here till 2082. So
I did say that. Right? You can say 2070, but then it turned into 80.
Well, move to adjourn.
moved by Commissioner Rodriguez McDowell, seconded by Commissioner Altman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned and thank you.
Thank you, Tina.